Trev's Hockey Show. I'm the Trev. That's too sweet. Anyway, continuing on with retired numbers and really keeping the San Jose Sharks up to date. You know, it's kind of one of my favorite things to do with these retired numbers is keep them as up to date as possible. I mean, obviously there's a lot of teams I'm playing catch up with, which is kind of obvious, but there are 180 plus retired numbers. But where I can keep up with teams, I am, and thankfully with San Jose being a 30 plus year team and only their second number retired, we talked about the first one here, which is only a couple years ago. Keeping up with San Jose is pretty easy. But anyway, today we're talking about a player who, in my mind, only seemed to get better as a player as a result of coming to Northern California. And not only did it benefit him as a player, but it kept the team pretty competitive for pretty much his entire time in San Jose, which, you know, is a bit of a long time, so I hope you're going to stay with me on this one. Today we're talking about the second number retired by the San Jose Sharks, that being the number 19, which is worn by Jumbo Joe, Mr. Joe Thornton. So let's talk about it. Alright, so Thornton's 15-year career with the San Jose Sharks began on November 30th, 2005. When Thornton was traded to the San Jose Sharks from the Boston Bruins for Marco Sturm, Wayne Primo, and Brad Stewart. Now, back then, and even to this day amongst some people, this trade was considered very lopsided. And on paper and on the grand scheme of things, it kind of is. I myself want to believe this, but I look at it from the other side. No matter how successful it was for San Jose and keeping them competitive and whatnot, think of what it did for the Bruins in a shorter time, but I'm not here to open that argument right now. Now, what was neat about this trade, and I've mentioned this before, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the Marlowe video, the Sharks had the number 1 and number 2 picks from the 1997 NHL entry draft. That was pretty sweet, putting Marlowe right next to Thornton. It worked out beautifully. And right off the hop, though, Thornton was able to meld quite nicely into the San Jose Sharks, helping them finish out the 05-06 season. Now, Thornton would find instant chemistry with Jonathan Cheechoo, helping Cheechoo win the Rocket Richard Trophy as the league's leading goal scorer, and would eventually be named alternate captain of the San Jose Sharks before the 05-06 season ended. Now, in his 58 games in the 05-06 season with the Sharks, Thornton would contribute 92 points in 58 games. That's sick. That's damn near 2 points per game. Now, combined with his Bruins stats, Thornton would lead the league in assists with a career-high 96 assists, as well as a career-high in points with 125 in 81 games between Boston and San Jose to help the Sharks advance to the playoffs. Now, in said playoffs, the Sharks would make short work of the Nashville Predators, eliminating them in 5 games before losing to the Western Conference semifinals to the eventual Stanley Cup finalists in the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games, with Thornton adding only 9 points in 11 games. Now, for Thornton's half season with the Sharks, he'd be nominated to the NHL's first NHL All-Star team, as well as be awarded the Art Ross Trophy for leading the league in points, as well as being awarded the Hart Memorial Trophy as league MVP for the 2005-2006 season. Now, to date, Thornton is the only player in league history to win both trophies while switching teams mid-season, as well as the highest point total recorded by a player in a season while switching between 2 teams. So, after a season like that, things look pretty promising for the Sharks. The 2006-2007 season will be Thornton's first full season with the Sharks, and despite a slow start to the season for Thornton, which was later reported that Thornton was playing through a toe injury, which didn't really fully heal until January, he still managed to find his stride and went about going to winning his second Art Ross Trophy. Now, along the way, Thornton would play in his first NHL All-Star game as a member of the San Jose Sharks, which ended up being the 4th of his career. Now, in a full 82 games played, toe injury and all, Thornton would lead the Sharks with 92 assists and 114 points. Now those 114 points put him second in league scoring, finishing 6 points behind Sidney Crosby. So didn't quite get his second Art Ross trophy. His 92 assists, though, were a league lead and made Thornton only the third player in NHL history to record back-to-back 90 assist seasons. The other two only being some guys named Gretzky and Lemieux, but who's counting, right? Now the Sharks would advance to the playoffs and again made short work of the Nashville Predators, eliminating them in 5 games before running into the defensive brick wall that was the Detroit Red Wings, being eliminated in 6 games. Now Thornton would go on to a point per game with 11 points, and this would be the last season that Thornton would score over 100 points in a season. It takes good with the bad, right? The 2007-2008 season would be the first of many dominant San Jose Sharks seasons, as far as the regular season was concerned. Now, along with Thornton, who contributed his first hat trick as a Shark on March 25th, 2008 against New Jersey, the Sharks win the Pacific Division, their third in team history, but more importantly, this will also be the first of 4 straight division titles. Now Thornton would add 96 points in a full 82-game schedule, good enough to lead the team, and finish 5th in league scoring. Now in the playoffs, the Sharks looked to continue about their winning ways, first eliminating the Calgary Flames in 7 games, before ultimately losing in 6 games to the Dallas Stars, with Game 6 being a 4 overtime period loss. Now, that one's just hard to stomach. Not so much the fact that it was a Game 6 overtime series loss, but the fact that it happened in 4 overtime periods. Just ouch. Now, Thornton would lead the team in playoff points with 10 in 13 games. Now, given the regular season Thornton had, he'd be nominated to the NHL's second NHL All-Star team for the second time in his career, but also his first time as a Shark. The 2008-2009 season would be another dominant Shark season, and even with a new coach at the helm, that being Todd McClellan, who had just won a Stanley Cup as an assistant coach in Detroit, the idea of a deep playoff run was always back in the Sharks' minds. And this season would Thornton score his first penalty shot goal in his career on December 30th, 2009 against the Washington Capitals. Now, along the way, Thornton would also play in his third and his last NHL All-Star game as a Shark, but he would also be nominated as captain of the Western Conference All-Stars. So that's not a bad thing to put in your resume, right? Now, with Thornton, the Sharks would not only win the Pacific Division, but would also set franchise records in wins and points with 53 and 117 respectively, both numbers which still stand as of this recording. Now, on top of winning the team's first President's Trophy, Thornton would add 86 points in a full 82 games. And the playoffs, well, they weren't very nice. It would can only be described as an upset, and that's probably putting it nicely. The heavily favored Sharks were eliminated in 6 games by the Anaheim Ducks, with Thornton only adding 5 points in those 6 games. The what could have beens. The 2009-2010 season would see the Sharks make some changes, ultimately sending Jonathan Cheechoo to the Ottawa Senators for Danley Heatley. And the chemistry between Heatley, Marleau, and Thornton was almost reminiscent of when Thornton joined the team, and it was Thornton, Marleau, Cheechoo. And under this revamped offense, the Sharks would once again win the Pacific Division, with Thornton adding 89 points in 79 games, which was once again good enough to lead the team. And in the playoffs, the Sharks' main goal was to at least get to past the conference quarterfinals. And after 6 games, including 3 straight overtime games, the Sharks would eliminate the Colorado Avalanche before making relatively short work of the Detroit Red Wings in 5 games. Ultimately, they would, though, run into that thing that was called the Chicago Blackhawks in 2010, and they would eventually be eliminated in a 4-game sweep at the hands of the Stanley Cup champs, and Thornton would add 12 points in 15 playoff games. The 2010-2011 season would see Thornton inherit the captaincy of the San Jose Sharks after previous captain Rob Blake had announced his retirement from the NHL. I would also see Thornton record his 1,000th NHL career point on April 8, 2011 against the Phoenix Coyotes. And the Sharks would continue their winning ways, winning their 7th Pacific Division, their 4th in a row, with Thornton adding 70 points in 80 games. Now, it's worth noting that this would be the first time in 7 years that Thornton wouldn't average a point per game. But that's not all bad, given the seasons Thornton's had to this point. Now, in the playoffs, the Sharks obviously wanted to improve on their previous season's playoff run. After 6 games, including 3 overtime wins, they were one step closer by eliminating the Los Angeles Kings before going a full 7 games to eliminate the Detroit Red Wings on the way to the Western Conference Finals. Now, this was the 2nd straight year the Sharks would go to the conference finals. And while their run in the conference finals wasn't a carbon copy of the previous season, they ended up being eliminated to the eventual Stanley Cup finalist. Not the champion this time, the finalist, in the Vancouver Canucks in 5 games. And Thornton would lead the team in playoff scoring with 17 points in those 18 games. The 2011-2012 season would continue to see the Sharks making some moves to improve their offense and, hopefully make themselves a little more solidified as a contender on a contender basis. Shipping out Danny Heatley, who, he just arrived 2 seasons ago, but was well on his way to a sharp decline. They shipped him off to Minnesota, and in a separate deal from Minnesota, brought in future Norris Trophy winner and hopefully future video topic in Brent Burns in a separate deal. Knocking on wood, hopefully we do. Thornton would play his 1,000th NHL game on October 21st, 2011. And a sure sign that things were changing, the Sharks would finish 2nd in the Pacific Division, with Thornton adding 77 points in a full 82 games. Now in the playoffs, the Sharks jumped out to an early lead against the St. Louis Blues with a 2-overtime Game 1 win, but ended up losing the next 4, with Thornton adding only 5 points. And then we had a lockout. So, like so many players, Thornton would start the 2012-2013 season in Europe, playing for HC Davos of the Swiss League, but when the NHL returned to play, setting up a 48-game schedule, well, Thornton came back and he kind of had to. He's contractually obligated. Of course, being it was only a 48-game schedule, the Sharks just managed to make it to the playoffs, with Thornton leading the team with 40 points in a full 40-game schedule. Now, in those playoffs, the Sharks, being the number 6 seed, well, they managed to dispose of the Vancouver Canucks in 4 straight, including 2 overtime wins, before going a full 7-game series, being eliminated by their interstate rivals in the Los Angeles Kings. And Thornton would add 10 points in 11 playoff games. The 2013-14 season would see Thornton break the Sharks' all-time assist record of 567, passing teammate, he was active at the time he broke the record, passing teammate Patrick Marleau. And Thornton would add 76 points in a full 82 games, with the Sharks advancing to playoffs for this 10th straight season. So, again, the move to San Jose paying dividends, right? Well, this is the part where we kind of kiboshed that final statement there. In the playoffs, the Sharks, who were favored to go on a deep playoff run, like they had been for so many years up to this point, managed to have the Kings in a 3-0 series stranglehold before somehow finding a way to lose the next 4 straight games, and the series to the eventual Stanley Cup champs in the LA Kings, with Thornton adding only 3 points in those 7 games. Ouch. Now, one of the biggest changes the Sharks made prior to the 14-15 season was stripping Joe Thornton of the team captaincy and announcing that the Sharks would play the season without a captain. Now, for Thornton, it didn't really seem to affect him all that much, as he still managed to put up 67 points in 78 games, while for the first time since 2003, the Sharks failed to qualify for the playoffs. Change. It's happening. The 2015-16 season, however, would be a nice rebound for both Thornton and the Sharks, and I think both needed it. Now, Thornton would score his 1,300th point on January 26, 2016 against the Colorado Avalanche, while putting up a point per game average for the first time since the 2010-2011 season, putting up 82 points in a full 82-game schedule. And so definitely a nice rebound, points-wise anyways, for Thornton. And the Sharks would qualify for the playoffs after a year away, and they were definitely on a mission. Now, they eliminated the LA Kings in 5 games before eliminating the Nashville Predators in a full 7-game series. And, that meant that they were going to the Stanley Cup, or to the conference finals. And in said conference finals, they eliminated the St. Louis Blues in 6 games to advance to the Stanley Cup finals for the first time, and as of this recording, the only time so far in franchise history. I mean, I'm not going to lie, for myself anyway, seeing the Sharks and Thornton actually make it to the Cup final for the first time in this team's young history, it was kind of cool. It was kind of nice, but unfortunately they ran into the Pittsburgh Penguins, who were on a mission to look for their 4th Cup in their franchise history. And, unfortunately, when you run into Sidney Crosby, things like this can happen. And despite the Sharks' best efforts, including a Game 3 overtime win and managing somehow to stay alive in Game 5, they would ultimately lose the Stanley Cup in 6 games to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Thornton would add a career-high 21 points in 24 games, including a career-high with 18 assists. Now, back to the regular season. For the regular season that Thornton had, he'd be nominated to the NHL's 2nd All-Star team, his 2nd time nominated as a Shark, as well as the 3rd time and last time in his career. Now, 2016-17 season would see Thornton record his 1,000th career assist on March 6, 2017 against the Winnipeg Jets, while contributing 50 points in 79 games. So production's going down a bit, but that's okay. It's Thornton, right? Now, the Sharks would qualify for the playoffs, but unlike the previous season, luck wasn't necessarily on their side, as the Sharks would find themselves out early, losing in 6 games to the Edmonton Oilers, with Thornton adding only 2 assists in 4 games. Ugh. Now, the 2017-18 season would be a bit shorter a season for Joe Thornton, and I'm sure he didn't plan it that way, but after 47 games, Thornton would find himself on the injured reserve shelf for the remainder of the season, so thus missing any chance the Sharks might have had at making the playoffs. But in the 47 games that he did play, Thornton would add 36 points. Now, the 2018-19 season would be a year of milestones for Joe Thornton, as on November 13th, 2018, he would score his 400th career goal against the Nashville Predators. On January 15th, 2019, Thornton would play in his 1,000th game as a member of the San Jose Sharks, and on February 11th, 2019, Thornton would pass Gordie Howe for 9th on the all-time assist list. Now, all told, Thornton would add 51 points in 73 games, and the Sharks would qualify for the playoffs with hopes of, doing better than the previous season. And after going down 3-1 against the Vegas Golden Knights, the Sharks fought back to win the next 3 games, including a Game 7 overtime win to eliminate the Vegas Golden Knights before eliminating the Colorado Avalanche in another full 7-game series, before ultimately being eliminated in 6 games in the Western Conference Finals by the eventual Stanley Cup champs in the St. Louis Blues, with Thornton adding 10 points in 19 playoff games, including a career-high 4 playoff goals. Now, unfortunately, this would be the last time the Sharks would make the playoffs with Joe Thornton in the lineup. The 2019-20 season would be Thornton's last season in San Jose, and even though the Sharks were on a sharp decline, Thornton still managed to record his 1,500th career point on February 4th, 2020. And with the Sharks definitely not making the playoffs, the team started to trade away some key components and some players, such as Patrick Marleau, trading him to the Pittsburgh Penguins. But as the trade deadline came and the trade deadline went, despite requesting a trade, hopefully to a contending team so he had a chance to, chase a cup for at least one more time in his career, that request would go unfulfilled. And Thornton would end up finishing the season in San Jose, adding 31 points in 70 games in what became the 1920 season. So given the way the 2019-2020 season ended, and given the way the 2020-2021 season would become, Thornton would eventually end up becoming a free agent, and would ultimately ended up signing with the Toronto Maple Leafs on October 16th, 2020, which ultimately brought an end to Joe Thornton's time with the San Jose Sharks. I really hope you're still with me on this one. So that is the story of the number 19. So let's talk some numbers. All right, so his 15-year totals with the San Jose Sharks include 1,104 games played, which include 251 goals, a team record 804 assists for 1,055 points. Now, if we're translating this into playoff stats, that's 144 games played with 25 goals, 90 assists, which again is a team record, and 115 points. He's a first-time NHL All-Star once in 2006, as well as a second team NHL All-Star twice in 2008 and 2016. He won the Art Ross Trophy in 2006 as the league's leading scorer, as well as the Hart Memorial Trophy in 2006 as league MVP. As mentioned in the video, he's the only player in NHL history to win both trophies while switching teams mid-season. He also has the highest point total recorded by a player playing with two different teams in one season, holds the NHL record for most games played by a first overall selection in 1,714. That's in his career. That's not with San Jose. Now, as of this recording, he is not yet in the Hockey Hall of Fame, although I'm sure once he's eligible, he's in like Flynn, with his number being retired by the San Jose Sharks on November 23rd, 2024. So, here's my opinion of the guy. Alright, so firstly, it is no exaggeration. The man is tall. He is big in person. On skates, he's just bigger. I mean, definitely a Playmaker's Playmaker, though. I mean, never one to score much, but when he scored, they were pretty goals. He was more of a Playmaker, and trust me, on any given night, Thornton's on all the highlight reels with some sick, amazing play. He was just fun to watch for a guy his size. You know, being the Playmaker he is, put in a power forward frame, it was no wonder he was drafted first overall, and it was no wonder that, you know, he was able to have the kind of career he had. I mean, quite literally, if a defender gave Thornton an inch, he took the mile, and then he took an extra mile just for good measure. You know, always a consistent threat, even in his prime, coming out of his prime when he was still putting up 70, 80 points. You know, you could always count on him for a good point total. It's almost a shame, though, that his regular season success didn't translate to playoff success, because there should have been at least 2 or 3 times Thornton should have been fighting for a cup as a member of the Sharks. But, you know, his hindsight is 2020, right? His history is always provisional, and it's always written by the winners. But I'm sure they would even say if Thornton could get his chance for a cup, he should have at least one by now. But either way, a fun player to watch in San Jose. Definitely helped the Sharks' prospects of becoming a solid contender and knowing how to play like a solid contender, even if their playoff success was never a guarantee, even if only going to the Stanley Cup Finals once during Thornton's time. That was enough to put the Sharks on the map. It's never a bad thing. Alright, so that was another one of them Trev's hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've made it to this point. And if you have made it to this point, just know that I am very, very grateful. I really am. So if you want to say hi, if you've made it to this point, if you dig what I'm doing, give me that thumbs up. I really would appreciate that too. If you want that red button that says subscribe all over it, if you haven't hit it by now, what's stopping you, man? I know you want to. You know I want you to. The algorithm would definitely appreciate you doing that, and you know, we're on that push to 500. We're at 271, so let's make something happen. feel free to hit that red button. If you want to, you can follow that link in my description there. It'll take you to my Facebook page. I'd love to build an audience on there. So moving forward, well, as far as retired numbers goes, I think it's about time I finish starting off every team. There's one team that I haven't started yet, so I might as well start that. But either way, in the meantime, and in between time, be looking for Revamped and Trev. Later.